Okay, so now we've got our job, we know the position we want, we know the requirements that candidates need to meet to be qualified to fill the job, and we've also decided the schedule when we want the candidate to be working to fill the particular requirements of the customer. So now the next stage, after we've defined our requirements and our schedule, is to define the properties of the job. And the primary sort of job of the properties is to assist the system to calculate my billing and invoice charges. So first of all, if we look down here, we've got a number of fields that we need to specify. And the first one that we specify is our pipeline group. So you might recall that we have the concept of an unpublished pipeline and a published pipeline. So even though in most cases for a temporary job you will not be publishing your job to your pipeline, or sorry, to your careers board, you may still need pipelines because we might want to have different things happening when we invite candidates to this temporary job, or when we actually accept them into the job, we may have a specific process that we want to follow. So we'll pick our general pipeline, and we can pick from any of the pipelines that we've defined. The next thing we're saying, for this job, for this enrolled nurse pay point 1, what award are we going to pay? Well, typically you'll only be able to return one award because this enrolled nurse belongs to the nurses award, so that will return by default. Likewise, the rule set. Now, we need to talk about this a little bit more, because while you might be under the nurses award, you might have different variations of that award that you are utilizing for your customers. And I'll take you through, I'll just do a little recap when we get to the end of this about how we define these settings at the customer level, because this essentially is coming from the customer. But again, in most cases, like 90% of the time, I'm sure that your award and your rule set will be the same thing. But it does give you the flexibility of determining your different variations if you have different variations for different customers, which could very well be the case. Our timesheet settings, again, the timesheet settings that you get selected here are essentially determined by what award you selected above here. So really, you can't really make any mistakes here, because you select your position, then you're only going to get returned the awards relevant for that position. When you select your award, you're only going to get the rule sets relevant for that award, and when you select your timesheet settings, you're only going to get those that are relevant for the award that you have also selected. So it's reasonably straightforward. The second thing that we do is, what is the process period group? And we say, well, what pay frequency? So when we place a candidate into this job, when are they going to get paid? Well, in this case, it's a Monday to Sunday pay week, and they get paid on the Wednesday. Now again, we'll do a bit of a recap, because the value that gets returned to this lookup is entirely determined by what you've specified for the account of this job. So remember, this account is for Alliance, and then when we jump back in and have a look at the Alliance account in a moment, you'll see that these were defined there. So again, it's unless your customer, Alliance in this case, has different pay frequencies that they want you to pay candidates provided to them, you'll only have one option to select from here. Likewise, public holiday group might be a little different, because you could have a customer that's in more than one public holiday area. You will have defined the public holiday groups relevant for this customer, and you would have maintained them there. And again, you only return here records that have been defined at that customer level. So we've got the pay frequency, we've got our public holiday group. We need public holiday group because if we're going to pay people automatically differently, different rates and different charge rates when they're working on a public holiday, then we need to know when that public holiday is. Our invoice period group. So this is the invoice frequency. Now in this case, again, it comes from the account. What is the customer? What is the frequency that they want you, or that you have negotiated with them to provide your invoices to them? In this case, again, customers can have multiple frequencies. I know it doesn't happen very often, but I'm sure it will happen at some stage. So here in this case, these come from the customer record, and we'll revisit that. I won't go into price books at this point, because price books are a sort of another level of complication, but they really do give you ultimate flexibility, because you can have different price books that you want to assign, and because the price books then can come back and redetermine the rates that are going to be used for this job. So here you see we've got this job, you can see that it's already returned the rates, the pay and the charge, because in this case we've defined the rates at a default level. So in other words, there's a default level that says any enrolled nurse that is working will be paid $23.12 and will be charged at $27.74. But again, I could have override rates at the customer level, and therefore it could have returned different rates. But even then, I can still override the rates here. So maybe we've decided that we're going to pay a slightly higher rate for this job, so we'll put in $25.50, and we're going to charge a little bit more as well. But then we want to make sure that we're accounting for super, so we put in our super. We want to make sure we've got our work cover covered. Put this in, and we're going to have our payroll tax covered as well. Now, the rates that turn up here are controlled by the award and by the rates that you've specified. So if you haven't specified that for this award we want to cover super and work cover and payroll tax, then it just simply won't turn up. So we cover that. We did cover that when we talked about rates in our previous videos. So here we're saying then again, these are the properties of the job. So what pipeline group, and this is useful because remember, if we assign somebody to a pipeline into a job, we're going to do two things for our temporary job. We're going to either invite candidates directly to accept invitations to work, or we're going to accept them directly into the job. And when we do so, there might be processes that we want to automate. That comes from the pipeline group. Award is determined by the position, rule set determined by the award, timesheet settings determined by the award, and these settings determined by the customer. So we have our job. We are ready to now view our estimate. What we want to do here is we want to view to make sure that the financials of this job make sense. Before we do so, just a couple of extra points here. When we're going to allocate people to this shift, we're going to select fill all shift in this case, which means when you allocate a candidate to the roster to fill the schedule of this job, they need to be available to work the entire schedule of this job. If I said no, then that means that for this job, which is going for 4 weeks, I could have a different candidate on each day of that schedule if I want to. So that gives you the flexibility either to ensure completeness of schedule by one candidate, or cherry pick the schedules for that the candidates themselves could maybe pick. So that's the option there. We'll leave it like this because we'll talk about that a little bit more. Limit invites, limit minutes for response. This is around automated invitations, and we cover that in a subsequent lesson. But note that essentially what we can say is that we want to limit invites. So we're saying that when we want the system to, when you set this up, the system will then, in this case, just to explain this, in this case, every 30 minutes, the top 20 candidates will be invited to fill this shift. And if the shift remains unfilled, 30 minutes time, the next 20 will be done. So it's essentially, think of it like batches. But we cover that, as I said, in much more detail when we talk about advanced notions of limiting invites, and also how do we decide who the top 20 candidates are. But that's, as I said, that's a choice for another lesson. That's going to be included in another lesson. Please check payable by candidate. Again, I cover that because it's a little complex. But really, you've got the option of doing please checks and making a call directly to the API that we have. So you drag a candidate into a particular stage, and then they will have a police check done automatically for them. But this gives you the ability to determine if it is the candidate that is going to pay for the police check, or if you're going to pay for the police check. Again, covered in a subsequent lesson. But there now are the properties. And then we can click View Estimate. So let's click View Estimate. So what's going to happen now is, while we wait a minute or two, it's going to process the roster, or the schedule that we've got. It's going to insert these rates, and it's going to come back using the award to determine what we should be paying these people. So now it's finished processing, and we can see that we've got our report. You notice that it's used the interpretation to work out, based on the schedule, the different rates and so forth that will be paid, and different overtime. For example, overtime here is Saturday, Sunday, because we're going over midnight, remember. And you'll come down here and you'll also see that we're calculating super, we're calculating payroll tax, we're calculating work cover. We've got a total on cost. We can see the average pay rates that has been calculated, and the percentage margin and the percentage dollars. So it really gives you the opportunity to make sure that you're not putting in jobs that are going to hurt you financially, and that you're meeting the minimum requirements of your business. So that gives you the opportunity, like you can go back now and you can change these rates and you can reprocess it. You can override that, so that's what you can do at this point in time. And essentially what we've done is we've already almost completed the payroll and the billing phase just by simply doing what we're doing here. All we've got to do now is decide who we're going to pay, and that will be determined by who we place on the job. So we now save the job. Now, as we talked about earlier, your job can have more positions. So this one, in this case, this job was for an enrolled nurse, but we might now want to add a nurse aide. We might want to add a registered nurse or some other position within the same job for the same customer, and we can do so because you can have multiple positions on the same job. But in this case, we'll just keep it simple. It's a one job, one position. So we say no. Now our job is saved, and our schedule is created, and then the next stage is decide, well, who are we going to fill this schedule with? You know, what applicants have we got? What candidates have we got? And so we can see our schedule has been populated through the process here, and it's how it's repeated based on the cycle that we created with the job in the first place. So now we're all ready to allocate people to this job. We will cover that in our next lesson. Thank you.